What's going on, YouTube? It's been 2 weeks since I've unboxed the Lomo Instant Wide camera, and now I think it's time that I give a proper review, not just an unboxing. So I used this camera twice. I went through 4 packs of film. I shot 2 packs at Thanksgiving with my family, and I shot 2 packs at Phoenix Comic-Con Fan Fest this past Saturday. And I'd like to talk about my experiences, what I learned from shooting this camera at those events, and also talk about what options you have for Instax Wide film in general. So the most important thing to point out is that this camera is $200. And in contrast, you can get one of these, which shoots the same film, on Amazon right now for $108. So the question I have to ask myself is, what do I get from the Lomo Instant Wide camera that this Fujifilm Instax Wide 300 camera can't give me? So I'll address all those things in today's quick review. So first of all, the handling and ergonomics. The camera is not the best to hold because it is so blocky. It's basically just a big rectangle, so it's very uncomfortable to hold with one hand. At Phoenix Comic-Con, I used a bracket like this for additional lighting, and this made it much easier to hold because I could grip it with both hands like this. With one hand, there's nothing for you to grab onto. There's no grip of any kind on the camera. You just have to probably always hold it with 2 hands, or make sure you use the straps so you don't drop it. Hold it like this. One-handed, not very good. Other than that, everything about the camera is massively improved over the previous Lomography Instax camera, the Lomo Instant that takes the Instax mini film. The viewfinder actually shows you good framing, even in the close-up, even in the closest setting of the lens. I had no problems framing my shots and getting pretty much what I expected out of the image. And I can zoom in on these because I scanned them to show you, but here are our 3 sample images from Phoenix Comic-Con Fan Fest. And there's something I want to talk about in each of these. First of all, in this image, I wanted to talk about the fact that even though the lens is a 35mm f8 lens, you can actually get a respectable shallow depth of field when you take portraits. I'll zoom in the scan, but as these 2 characters, the orange masked one up close is sharp, and the one behind him is slightly blurred, even though he was just standing right behind the other guy. So you can actually get decent depth of field that is shallow, make your photos a little more interesting. Of course, you cannot adjust the aperture on the Lomo Instant, so you just have to be shooting in a dark space so it goes to its widest aperture. In this photo of the furry, I wanted to point out that the exposure is quite good. Even I was worried, of course, that the white fur would throw off the camera's metering. So I put the exposure compensation to -1. And as you can see, the shot came out perfect even though I was at the closest focus. So the flash metering seems to work fine even when you're very close. Otherwise, trying to photograph like a huge white character like this would be very difficult. One problem with the flash metering and the exposure compensation, and really the only thing I don't like about the controls of this camera, is that you only have a +1 and a -1. On the Lomo Instant for Instax mini film, it has a +2 and -2. And I think you really, really need that because, for example, I don't have the photo here. I took a photo of someone with a big black drapery behind them. And even though I was on the -1 exposure compensation, the person was still blown out. And that's because there was so much black in the curtain of the photo that the auto flash thought it had to flash much brighter than it really needed to. If I had another stop lower of compensation here, I would have done that shot no problem. But for 99% of shots, the metering works quite well indoors and outdoors. Now, the major difference between this Lomo Instant Wide and what you could get out of that Fuji Instax 300 camera that I showed you on Amazon is on this camera, you have a much wider lens. On the Instax Wide 300, you have a 95mm f14 lens. In addition, you have pretty much full auto and exposure compensation, whereas on this camera, you have your creative modes such as multi-exposure and a bulb mode and the manual shutter speed modes, which does let you get more creative with your photography, but unless you're a hardcore photo nerd and want to experiment with those extra modes, a more affordable Fuji Instax Wide camera is probably better for you because they'll both take equally high quality photos. It's just a matter of how much control and creativity you want to add. If you want to use your camera just for family photos or for maybe a wedding, then I think one of the more affordable Fuji Instax cameras is for you. But if you want the ultimate control, then this camera is really your only choice, and it works well for what it does. It's up to you to decide if you're willing to spend the extra $90 at this time. So the third photo I wanted to talk about here of the three I have is the vignetting. As you can see, there is still some vignetting, though it is much, much, much better than on the Lomo Instant for Instax mini film. They must have really done the research and made the flash cover a much wider area, because while there is still a little bit of vignetting, it is a reasonable amount that adds to the aesthetics of the photo, unlike on the other Lomo Instant camera, where if you try to take a photo inside, half of your photo ends up being vignette. So that's what I wanted to talk about there. In conclusion, if you feel that the manual control options, again, it's still not fully manual control, but if you think you need these additional control options, if you're a photographer who likes to experiment, then this is definitely the Instax Wide camera for you to get. If you are simply using it as a point and shoot camera to take portraits and things, then I think another of the Fuji Instax Wide cameras are better. So those are really your options, and thank you very much for watching this review. If you have any questions about the camera or any of my other thoughts, please leave it in the comments and I'll be happy to answer. Other than that, thank you very much for watching and have a good evening.